Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Mary Lauder, and you are listening to the Since You Put It That Way podcast. It's the show that examines various health, wellness, and medical topics from unique perspectives. We will be having discussions and guests that will cause you to pause and consider, well, since you put it that way. Well, good day to everyone, and thank you for joining us on our next episodes of our podcast called Since You Put It That Way. And you know what we're driving for is looking at topics, ideas, maybe from a new perspective that would cause us to pause and say, well, since you put it that way. So I'm excited today. We've got a great guest, a good friend of mine and colleague, Lynn Swearingen. And Lynn lives in Boulder, Colorado. And Lynn and I have known each other for a number of years, and we're colleagues there. I had a medical practice in downtown Boulder, and where she worked was just down the road from that. And Lynn currently works in both administration and teaching at the Psychic Horizon Center. And the Psychic Horizon Center is located in Boulder, Colorado, and it's been a fixture there for many, many years. And that's also affiliated with the Church of Inner Light, which is also there in Boulder, Colorado. So Lynn, welcome today to our podcast.
Thank you very much. Well, good to be here.
Good. So we start today, we're going to have a topic that we're going to discuss about a course that you've provided for us. The course is about understanding your intuitive field and understanding your personal space and what that means on multiple levels. So before we get into that, I'd like to hear from you what your story is, where you came from, how you got to where you are, what you studied in college, all the things that make up your interesting and exciting experience being a human here, as our doggos would say, a human here on planet Earth.
Thank you. Excellent. I have been studying healing and spirituality since high school. Mm-hmm. And also studied history and anthropology, and then kind of angled me right back into the healing world when I took a course in acupressure massage therapy. So I learned Chinese medical theory and 5-element theory and acupressure while I was creating a special major called, quote unquote, holistic health practices.
Okay.
Because I was interested in non-Western modalities of healing. Didn't want to be a doctor, didn't want to memorize everything, but I was still interested in what and how people heal and use their spirituality. So it goes hand in hand. Most cultures' spiritual traditions also include healing. They're not separate.
Right.
And so I have been a massage therapist for 29 years. Mm-hmm. And then I joined the Psychic Horizon Center to learn more about managing my own energy and exploring more of the intuitive side. So I've been with them since 2004.
Mm-hmm. So that's just shy of 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned spirituality. Interestingly, kind of a Western bent for medicine and spirituality is they don't often collide. They would be like the science of the doctor and the science of medicine. And then there's the patient who may have beliefs, but I see things like where a patient may say, if they're in a tough situation, well, I'm trusting God. And so that's a very Western thing. How do we look at that maybe from a maybe more global perspective or an integrative perspective, which actually means a wholeness perspective?
I would say that the term worldview, like how you view your environment, is what I think I like most about looking at like tribal cultures. So I was and have been still interested in indigenous cultures around the planet, and usually smaller tribal groups, and some of those groups are much larger now. But they look at their community and their world and their interaction with nature in a different way than our huge Western, economic, political system.
Right.
And it's much more of a grounded in the belief system is family. So that's one way to look at it. Your nuclear family or your immediate group in your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And how you interact with each other and with nature to be able to survive. So this is kind of gets back to a maybe like prehistoric way of looking at humans and the way we developed. Mm-hmm. Is that in the beginning, humans relied on each other a lot more to survive. And then we started relying on stuff and weapons and agriculture and things that were systems of creating food or shelter or trade. It's like kind of go off on the rails when I think about this, the web that we have woven to be able to create a life for ourselves. And so happiness and health and survival sometimes get taken apart. It's like if we're all just surviving just to live through the day, it gets kind of separated from happiness and what wholeness and health means. Yes. And there's no reason they can't all be together.
Okay. I think that's really interesting about relying on tools and weapons, thinking of the wheel, fire, a knife, things that we develop to make our lives, I don't know if better is the right word, but to make us be able to take advantage more of the environment around us. But at our core, we're hardwired for love and connection.
So it's so interesting because I think the tools help us create connection with our environment. So they're very useful. It's artistic. Yes. It's creative. It creates things that then help people live more comfortably. Like, can you imagine before beds? So I love my bed.
Yes, I do too. Mine too. Yes.
I like to be comfortable in our bed. Someone had to invent it and create it, and like all the ramifications of trial and error and experimentation based on your physical comfort.
Right.
And the tool aspect is so interesting because I don't think that there's any other way in our world to progress without creating and without our creative sense as well. Right. So that's something endemic to who we are as humans on the planet. We're constantly creating and innovative. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. No, that's a very interesting point because I think of too, we think of the fight or flight response. It's actually fight, flight, freeze, and now there's another component called fawn. So that's the autonomic nervous system getting triggered for survival. Anxiety as an emotion or even as an experience is looking for more information for us to make a decision about what's going on. And we're always seeking safety. All those things are super primitive and come from super primitive parts of our brain, the midbrain and the lower part of the brain, but primarily the midbrain. So now that we've got tools and we've industrialized and we've agriculturalized and we've civilized, that basic need of love and connection is there. Using our creativity and our tools for a better life, I wonder if that's how we just get beset from being connected to one another, using our tools and the things we've created, filling that same gap then for the love and belonging.
It's distractions.
Yes, I love my truck. I don't have a truck. My husband does. I bought it for him, but I love my truck. Or I love my, whatever it could be, and yet maybe relationships could be challenged. Communication is challenged. We feel isolated. We get traumatized because, face it, it's a difficult, life is not easy, nor for the faint of heart. And so things always happen. Yeah.
And we identify with the stuff.
We do.
Start to identify with the things and with what the things can do rather than what's going on inside of us, or rather than even the connection with friends and family. Sometimes that gets supplanted by our distraction, by our job, by busy, whatever, the laundry list of excuses that keeps us separate, not only from each other, but from our own heart, our intuition.
Right. Yeah. I have my patients and clients do a particular exercise. It's a guided imagery, but I have them visualize their ideal day. And I have them use all their senses. What's it look like, sound like, taste like, smell like, feel like? So they get kind of this concept. No one's ever like so excited that they're jumping off a mountain or building a bridge. They're all things like, I'm walking through the woods, I'm meeting with my loved one, I'm having this beautiful meal that tastes like or smells like, and then I do some work. And so interestingly, those are the very same things when we create our ideal day that you were talking about. Nature, connection to one another, and really living, I would say, kind of simplistically with that connection through that, which was there before all the tools and the industrialization and civilization, wasn't it?
And what's interesting, though, is that you can also get to live that simplistic, and the simplistic doesn't mean diminished by any means. It's
right.
Like a basic level of goodness, I guess.
Yeah.
You can live that way with the tools, with the iPhone, with the computer, with the truck.
Yes.
With each other, with the knives, and really see the value. It's almost like reconnecting with what the value is of what the tools are and how we use them and what we can create with them without it diminishing our own sense of self.
Yeah. And I think about too, healing, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about, our intuitive field, medicine, and a lot of things that we use in modern medicine came right out of the earth. I meet many patients who have been challenged and diagnosed with cancer. I refuse chemo, it's poison. They're going to put, well, all things at certain levels are poison. Oxygen, if you have too much oxygen, it knocks out your ability to breathe because it hits certain sensors in your, the core of your brain that tell you to quit breathing because the oxygen carbon dioxide level is flipped. Cancer and treatment for there comes out of the ground. A lot of the elements, cisplatinum and other things are used, and then we have refined those. So I always think that there are tools around for us to engage with, no matter what we're faced with our health, no matter what we're faced with a diagnosis. And that the key that I use with folks really brings them back to their ideal day when I'm taking them through deep healing around a chronic illness. And that comes back to the connection to themselves, connection with others, and understanding the environment and connecting with nature.
I find it really interesting when I think of the yew tree, YEW, fairly recent studies of the properties of the yew tree have been used in AIDS drugs.
Okay.
AIDS and cancer, I believe. And so, just remembering that pretty much every aspect of medicine has come from a plant, originally just straight out of the ground, weeds in the yard, and
Yes.
eons of experimentation and usage to find what does what helps what in the system. That
Right.
when we are then become this kind of pill popping society, maybe
Mhm.
not as much, but not in my circles because I'm much more focused on the um, alternative aspects and alternative um, supplements that even if you are taking a aspirin, we kind of forget. So this is kind of where the spirit to me has been disconnected. We've forgotten that little aspirin actually originally came from an aspen tree.
Mhm.
Aspen and birch and other trees that have that same analgesic
Yeah.
property to it that science has identified, which is yay science,
Mhm.
but it separates the energy in a way. It separates our awareness that yes, this tree and this planet that is where the healing property originated, and it gets so refined into the little molecules that they put together and then create this little pill
Right.
that then yes works, but then like you were saying, it can also be a poison, too much
Yeah.
of that or in the wrong situations. And that I just love, I don't love it, but it's just so interesting to watch where we've been so disconnected from nature in that way,
Yeah.
forgetting that, it's like what's that called? Mass, um, what's the word for forgetting? Great.
I forgot the word for forgetting.
Thesaurus. Amnesia.
Oh, amnesia. Okay,
Like
mass
we have this
amnesia. Yes,
societal
got you.
amnesia
Yes.
around where things come from, what they're for, how to use them for the betterment of our being,
Yeah.
and not necessarily for the betterment of the drug companies.
Right. So we've reduced a lot of things, haven't we? There's been a reductionistic approach to medicine, whether, you look at, it's one of the things we learn in osteopathic school is how the patient functions in their entire environment. And that's what drove me to want to be an osteopath, because I was going to be able to learn things holistically from that perspective. But you can't take them out of their environment. And yes, you get a pneumonia. Yes, it could be community acquired where you get respiratory droplets and things like that. But then there is also this concept of, are you run down? Have you been stressed? Are you sleeping well? Are you, what's happening in your personal communication world that may disrupt that and then have impact upon our body, our immune system, and our ability to fight things off? Yeah.
Which is interesting. The going into a doctor's office, into the cube of the room, and it's cold, and you sit on paper, and it's impersonal and
Yes.
sterile.
Yes.
To then be asked questions about your life,
Yes.
and then you have to create your story to the doctor about your life, and
Yes.
whether they're listening to you or not,
Yes.
there's a lot that gets missed.
There is.
So, yeah, it's very interesting to not have the bigger perspective, which is why I like my clients come to my home, most of them. Here's the massage table. I work on
Yes.
them here. They come into my world, and then I just give them all kinds of space to tell me everything that's going on with them,
Yes.
including, are you sleeping? What's your stress level? All of those questions
Right.
come up in the course of what I do with people. And I just love that because none of it's wrong.
Right.
None of it is wrong. It's just where we are. And
Yeah.
that's where I like to start. Like, I'm not going to delve into, the long checklist of questions. It's like, they're just going to show me what they want to show me in the moment. And
That's right.
more gentle.
Present to you what could have healing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking today as I was driving home from a meeting of how layered and textured healing is. and thinking about something that occurred way back when I was a kiddo. And now it feels like during this season that it's a time to, really have a healing about that. And it wasn't something that totally knocked me off my rocker or, displaced me. It was just a pattern that kept occurring that as I look back as an adult, it probably wasn't a very favorable pattern. But it was in my family. It was in my family of origin. Nobody's fault. It just was. And I thought how grateful I was that I could reach back, identify with that, identify the emotions, and then even while driving, apply healing to that and just let those hurtful feelings, because that's what it was, and things that disrupted my connection with my parents and with my loved ones could have that healed. I mean, I think that's really how simple healing can be. And again, we're using the word simple a lot here, but to think to how that gets distilled down to simplicity. So many things go into that. It's not reduced, but it's distilled, which is different. To make something simple or to become simple, that's something that's really layered and complex.
With things like childhood trauma or PTSD or all the layers of everything that we live through in the world we're in.
Yeah.
Which has all these amazingly bigger facets in the last few years.
Yes.
And by no means unusual to the course of human existence at all.
Yes.
And that's kind of where my mind goes, which it was one of the things that had created for me major anxiety in my life. Because, say, things like I remember watching the news about the Vietnam War in color, and it was traumatizing.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's like my baseline. And, to me, nothing's changed on the planet. Being a history buff doesn't, it totally reinforces that. But so that's why I love these tools that I teach, is that it helps me get back to something that's easy to do. It's easy to do, and I don't have to discount my whole life experience. It's just in addition to.
Right. I think it's good that we don't discount our whole life experience because it's brought us this far.
Mm-hmm.
So that reminds me of how resilient the body is. It reminds me that somehow God, the universe, love is not yet done with us, or we're not done with it. And we have other things to yet explore in our life. And so there's reason and purpose. And, reason and purpose for every day, and reason and purpose for transformation. And that's really what I think being connected to ourselves brings each day. And, it's, to me, that's one of the most exciting things about being a human, is being able to transform and learn and grow and be curious and have that fulfilled. And that's one of the things I like the most about being a human, I think.
It's like emotional maturity.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. I don't know that I've got that, but I'm saying I'm going to say
the M word. It's the M word.
Yes.
I realize that that's what I have been feeling.
Yes.
But it's a funny thing for me to say about myself, because yeah.
I'm just thinking,
most of the time,
I'm 60, I know enough. I don't know. I give up.
17 in here somewhere all the time, right? But it's like a plateau, like a leveling of my emotional being that to me is so exciting, because I've gotten to this place of I'm so excited. There's so much to do.
Right. Yes.
So much yet to do, and not, oh my God, there's so much to do. Like you've been presented with the, 4-foot stack of papers you need to deal with. And
right.
like, yeah, that is all just always going to be there, but it's more of a, yeah, like tapping into that enthusiasm about what else there can be for me to experience and how to be open to those connections that we're talking about.
Right.
Open to a clearer connection with my friends and family or the medical establishment or whatever. One of the things I tell people when they're either, venting about something uncomfortable about what they have to do or where they're going or who they're dealing with is I just say, hey, you can go ahead and vent about that, but also, and yes, and like in comedy,
Right.
you can also put into your imagination that there's someone that's going to give you a big smile and it's just going to kind of light that hope again.
Right.
Someone out there is looking for you. You're looking for whatever it is you're looking for, and they're looking for you too.
Right.
And so why limit our perspective of the world by doubting that anything?
Right. I think that's a good point. I think just be open-hearted, and just really expect good things to happen. I do feel that the universe is bent towards us. It is keen on meeting our needs and giving us a beautiful, loving, and fulfilled life, even amidst of some of the things that occur that are more challenging and difficult. And that's not to gloss over things. It's just at the end of the day, I think there's more good than not. And somebody said, well, if you believe that, what about all the bad stuff? And I said, well, I can still believe that the bad stuff will occur. But to stay in that mindset to expect the good things, that's what you're going to see then.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I think I want to buy a red sports car. So everywhere you look, somebody's driving a red sports car, right?
Exactly.
So,
and so I just, in this book I'm reading, the line just came up, do not be afraid of the universe. Don't let the universe make you afraid. What
right.
It was kind of that same thing of,
yeah.
If you're just going to don't let everything be a fear.
Yes.
Don't respond to everything in fear just because it's different or you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's that the universe, the world we live in, which it can be, some people might call it spirit or the overarching energy of the whole planet,
mm-hmm.
isn't all bad.
No.
And don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, I agree. To believe that way without a set of rules and regulations how to behave, that it's certainly there's more uncertainty. You don't have rapid, fast answers to life's questions, and you live with more mystery. And having tasted both sides of that equation, I choose the mystery. I choose to have the great love and benevolence of the universe support and lead me every day. And the more I do that, the more I open my heart, the more literally magic occurs. Just, and a miracle I see defined as a change in perception from fear to love. So anytime there's less fear in my life and there's more love, there's miracles happening. And, I love that as, and when I started in medicine, I could always kind of see that. And I could always see just working, independently, individually with folks. And that was always kind of the force that was around me with that. And now 30 years later, after being in every type of clinic and, encounter known to man through medicine, that's what I'm doing now. And that's really my happy place.
And that universe, the perspective of putting the words to it, the universe, the world, we are a piece of it. So yes. That's all within you.
Yes.
And I think that's where some people, if they have some different religious views are always going to see that outside of themselves,
Yes.
which is what our history in this Judeo-Christian society we live in
Yes.
has reinforced that it is outside of you.
Yes.
And also, and yes, and there's a huge part of the world that believes that it is within each of us. And that's what we're creating it. We're creating the miracle every day.
Yes.
Because we're creating.
Yes. Yep. I think that's great. Now, in the studies that you did, because what university did you go to?
San Francisco State University.
Right. So you're out there kind of in that really fun time during, in California. And
the interesting thing is I couldn't afford to go to like Naropa, which I always wanted to go to in Boulder, or the other couple of other big schools in there that were interdisciplinary and dealt a lot more with exactly what I wanted to do. But I created my own path at the state college level that included a bunch of different disciplines equally, which I loved because I was able to kind of get almost more of a holistic perspective because I was still studying history, anthropology, philosophy. We had a biofeedback lab, and that's where I first learned about Chinese medical theory, Eastern and Western meditative traditions, and then anatomy lab and physiology, like the sciences. So I got to have my fingers in every aspect of that holism that I wanted to look at.
Yeah.
And energetically just watching and I didn't even know what I was doing at the time, but since like all the Psychic Horizon stuff, recognizing what I was resonating with and what I wasn't. And I just let it sort of naturally pull me where I felt more comfortable. Yes. So I was definitely more comfortable in the philosophy, religious studies, and hands-on learning acupressure.
Yeah.
Because it was my body responding to the connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exactly what it does, because the body mirrors what's happening in the spiritual and emotional world, the mental emotional world. And the body heals. Boom. End of story. How is amazingly, if I cut my finger, I don't have to say, well, I'm sorry, I can't come out on Tuesday night because I'm watching my finger heal. Yeah. Sorry, and but it goes about its business. And so maybe I put a Band-Aid on. Certainly I might keep it clean, that type of thing. There's some basics. And that's the same thing. We can present to our nervous system our emotional issues, our trauma issues. The nervous system just heals them because it knows how to do that. We know the pathways now, the vagus nerve. There's more pathways that go up to the brain than come down. We know the midbrain is where a lot of the action occurs in the repeat loops. And we have ways then if we present to the nervous system and engage the energy centers, which are known as chakras, which are found embryologically in our development and is well documented, centuries and millennia ago through Chinese medicine that now matches up with what the osteopaths called Chapman's reflexes, the allopaths called trigger points. All that nomenclature is just different nomenclature saying the same thing, different perspectives saying the exact same thing. So the body heals. So when you were doing your studies, did you look at like the indigenous people and how that influenced the doctor-patient relationship?
To kind of talk about that in terms of the emotional connection between people. Is that when in North American, Native American traditions, if you've done something wrong or hit somebody or did something against the rules or got really mad, instead of being ostracized and told that you were wrong, you would be surrounded by your peers and your family.
You weren't
And
pushed away, you were pulled closer.
Right. You were pulled in, they held space for you to be able to work through it.
Wow.
So there's no shame. I'm sure there's some concept of that, but you weren't shamed for being angry. You weren't shamed or ostracized or told you were wrong and needing correction.
Yeah.
Instead, it was, and I'm saying that in terms of the body of work I studied. It doesn't have,
Right.
Yeah. So it was more about helping the person, the individual, work through the energy and the emotions back into wholeness, and not discounting what had just happened.
Yeah.
So the same with, say, grief. Grief is something that a lot of people can't handle. If I'm sad or grieving about something, a lot of people are like, oh, so sorry, pat, 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 here's a casserole, bye.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, and what I've learned to do is like, grieving, sure, great, come on in, here's some Kleenex,
Right.
let's cry, let's do it, own it, have it.
Right.
And in Western medical traditions, it's like, oh, you have an emotional issue, I'm going to send you to this person, or you need to talk to somebody, or you need to do something, is
Yes.
a term that I've heard a lot around a lot of different things. And it's really in the smaller, I don't even know a better word for that anymore, cultural traditions, is like, you don't need to do anything. You are doing it. You're doing it. You're doing sadness. You're doing anger. You're doing grief. So let's do it. It just needs to be done. That's why it comes up in our system.
Well, we tend to pathologize those emotions. So if you grieve too long, and we've come up with an arbitrary length of time, somewhere between 3 and 6 months, mind you, this is a first degree relative that's died. If you're grieving longer than 3 to 6 months, it's called protracted grief or pathological grief. And boy, I'm gonna, now I got lots to say about that. And and everyone, even myself, will be going, well, since you put it that way, because it's a complex emotion, and it's a complex series of emotions that include anguish, hopelessness, sadness, anger. And so it's very, very complex, this whole concept of grief. And it's not linear, nor did Elizabeth Kubler-Ross ever intend for it to be linear. And so I think that that's just super important. The concept of bringing the person closer when they're struggling. You mentioned shame. Shame means I'm bad. Guilt says I did something bad, but I'm still good. So we have to be really careful about understanding what shame is, and if a person goes into a shame spiral, and really understand and help them come to a point of, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but that probably, it turns out that it wasn't. Something didn't go right, but here you are, stay with us. And all of trauma pushes a person away, not only from one another, but from themselves, because it causes a person to dissociate from themselves because it's too painful. And then that gets compounded because you do something, and another person who's in that same arena pushes you away because of their perspectives and fears and things that they bring to the table. And parenting, I'm not a parent. I have a dog who's very well behaved, but I bring her close when I want her to do something different, when I want her to, and that's something I learned. I didn't do that right away. And I learned that, and oh my goodness, to see the difference in her She actually, just a little dog story, goes to dog camp a couple times a week. They use her to help dogs who are traumatized.
Oh, nice.
Tell me she didn't learn that as a modeled behavior. Because dogs pick up on all of that body language. That's what there's just champions at. So it's just kind of amazing to see that type of connection. But to think of that from indigenously, how we've lost that in medicine. I mean, I'm envious of the things you got to study while you were looking at those different healing components. Versus just only science and the reductionistic thought and pharmacologics and stuff like that. So it would do us well to kind of come back to bringing the person who's struggling closer. And, that's another thing too, when patients get well, okay, see you next year. Bye. Thanks for coming in. You get punished for doing well.
Yeah. Or you don't need to see anybody. You
right.
get a clean bill of health and then you're gone. And then
right.
I find it very interesting. I have a lot to say about the mental health crisis, so-called, that keeps coming up.
Yes.
In, Facebook and the news and whatever, that there's not enough money. There aren't enough practitioners. Everybody's got to be a volunteer for the suicide hotline. I could think the structures in place are awesome.
Yes.
But we do the same thing. We send people to a facility to deal with whatever their anxiety thing is with drugs or electrical treatments.
Yes.
And then deem them better and send them back on their way.
Yes.
And then not that I know that there's a lot of mechanisms in place that are great, but we are begging for mental health help.
We're begging for connection.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
I like to say, you know what? There are so many mental health practitioners in your world right now. Anyone who can make you a cup of tea, any friends that you can call and say, I feel like shit. My roommate came downstairs in tears the other day and just needed to talk, and we did it. And to just be able to reach out to each other, not necessarily with a huge psychotherapy session, but it is that connection. We get our mental health from connection. Yep. I get my mental health at the grocery store by trying to go to that guy's lane because I've known him for 30 years. Right. And we have a little chat when I'm buying my stuff. And that is like this it's a heart gift.
Yeah.
And he remembers me. We don't remember each other's names all the time, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
Made that little connection and made that part of ourselves shift. It's like a dynamic, energetic shift in our space when we do that.
Yeah, we're opening up and we're connecting. And I think we're connecting with the connections that is there. We just were unaware that the connection was there. Because we all are connected. So taking that into your course, because you've created for us, for not only our podcast listeners, but your crowd that works with you individually and your tribe and people, and then all the people that are going to come in through the website and the podcast, about how to maintain before you maintain, first identify and understand your intuitive field. I mean, how do you define what your intuitive field is? What is it?
The way to talk about it simplistically, back to that word, is simply the energy that you feel in your body.
Okay.
Your body, we have 5 senses that are already sensitive.
Yes.
We're already registering information from our world: light, sound, smell, taste, feel, heart sense, felt sense. You can feel your body when you just run 10 miles. It feels different than when you're sitting in a hot tub or sleeping.
Yes.
Those are all awarenesses that I consider part of your intuitive field, and also the energy around us. We have a ionosphere, an atmosphere around us that some people call it aura field, that is there. Science has recorded it, knows it's there. We know it because our senses in our hand, we can feel heat 2 feet away from the heat source.
Right.
That's pretty magical.
Yeah.
Or farther, depending on, the heat source.
Right.
So the intuitive field to me is also about managing it, recognizing the input and what it is, and how to identify what's yours and what's not yours, because we take on a lot of stuff. Like you were saying there, your dog knows a lot. Your dog is so aware of,
yes.
and animals do this, a lot of animals, so much more aware of energy, because they have a kind of a different lens. So your intuitive field to me is like fine tuning, focusing your lens at how you perceive the world, as well as perceiving and understanding what is going on internally for you.
You're talking about boundaries, really, aren't you? Understanding where you begin, where others are. And then not only, because it's the collective, you've got your boundaries, but other people have their boundaries, but then we're all one, but yet we're separate. We're individuals. We've individuated. So it's just understanding how to just function within that type of environment. And would you say that having and understanding your intuitive field would give you improved emotional and mental health?
Improved emotional and mental health is, to me, working on it. You improve by being aware of it.
Yes. Okay.
If I'm sad, I don't need to necessarily then be happy. I want to know my sadness. You learn from it.
Yes.
Okay. But the more you can have that, it's a healthy river. It's a healthy flow of energy, even when you hit spots, ripples in your emotional field.
Right. So what do you think, folks, when they do your course, what's the biggest takeaway, the number one goal takeaway they would have from your course?
I think remembering the permission to come back to yourself. So again, fine tuning that perspective, not necessarily onto what the chaos is around you, but to be able to look at what you're presenting, your beingness in a way. So the first tool is grounding. It's how to just ground right into who you are and just be, and then have certainty over how you manage your beingness, your space.
Okay.
And that just allows, it's like balance. It's like knowing your own balance and your own boundary, and then allows that's kind of a magical thing. It allows anything to happen, meaning you're ready to do whatever you need to do next.
Yes.
You're going to run from the tiger, or go get in the hot tub. Either way, you're doing it from your own space of truth.
Yes. Now, you were one of my teachers in the year-long course that I took at Psychic Horizons, and I learned these tools that you're teaching us, and I can say it changed my life. I can say that even going from patient to patient throughout the day, dealing with their different concerns, their different diagnoses, different problem solving all day, I would just get exhausted. And what I learned was, as I learned to understand my own intuition about things, my own boundaries, my own beingness, as we call it, a lot of that fatigue went away, because I could be there together with the patient, listening, caring, being empathetic, bringing ideas, solutions, diagnoses, treatments, but it still wasn't hung on me to get that all done, because it just changed how I presented in that situation. And it took away what I would call, compassion fatigue or battle fatigue, or, we call it physician or medical fatigue. It took that away, and it took the burnout away as well, because I just managed who I was differently.
And also probably a lot of people in the healing field are what we call out of control healers, meaning I need to get in there and fix you. I need to help you. I need to give you everything I am in order for you to get better, because that's my big heart.
Yep. I've been there, done that. I got the t-shirt. In fact, I have a few t-shirts about that, I'm sure. So yes.
And it really doesn't diminish any of your healing ability by not giving all yourself away. So that's the other aspect of these tools, is being able to have all of your energy.
So this could make you a better mom.
Mm-hmm.
When I say better, I mean, survivability, resiliency, a sense of self, a sense of wholeness, a sense of peace and contentment, which we're all, we all get to have. It could make you a better teacher. It could make you a better person who works in retail, could make you a better manufacturer, a better, whatever it is that you're doing in today's world and culture. Really, it only could add to what you're doing and help you.
It goes back to that use of the primitive tools when we started making tools and knives.
Yes.
Is that it is, everything has a purpose, and everything you do in your life, with your energy, with your creativity, with your job, you're creating your role, even as you also fill the role.
Got it. Got it.
And it's that to me is really exciting. So to tell you a kitchen story, is that I am a sort of amateur foodie.
Yeah.
And I have pots and pans and knives and implements and an oven and ingredients and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, a kid in a candy shop. It's like, oh, what do I do with all this? And if something didn't work right in the beginning, we had sort of talked about this before. It's like the first cake was really horrible. And instead of giving up, I just did it again. But then when I learned some of these energy tools, I got into my space. I grounded. I focused on how I was presenting my beingness in the kitchen with the cake ingredients.
Yes.
And I was able to get to this amazingly calm space of following the recipe and breathing and feeling really good about it. And the cake was fantastic.
Excellent.
It was amazing. And so that's when people say they cook with love. Well, I was actually feeling that happen.
Yes.
And so that kind of perspective can go into every action we do in our lives, regardless of our job.
Absolutely. And I did that today because I was in a meeting this morning, and the same sense was there of connection, of discernment, of beingness. And then after that, I had to run an errand to the store, and I took that same energy right to the store, and I engaged with every single worker there in that same manner. And it was absolutely one of the most delightful errand runs I've ever had.
And everything flows. Everything flows more easily.
If people carried things out to my car, they had great conversations. I was up and down the aisles, and they kept wanting to give me ideas. I mean, it was just a absolutely pleasant, wonderful day, and it could have been, oh, I've got to drive to get to this meeting. I have to hurry. I've got to find my way. It's all new. I didn't have any of that. It was just wonderful. And
that felt sense, I think, is one of the core joys in this course and all of these energy tools, is allowing you to have the felt sense of your own flow. So it's really embodying yourself, embodying the tools, and then being able to access them without it being difficult. So that's the other thing, is that when you get into that amazing flow where everything's going your way, you're going your way.
Yes.
Everything becomes easier.
Yes. It feels almost like slightly magical in that space.
It does.
And it's just really, it's fun to be a human at that time, despite whatever things you're dealing with. And then that gets you back to that ideal day. That gets you back to that sense of connection, using the tools that we then reach into those primitive emotions of connection, loving, and belonging. And that's living from, your sense of presence and beingness. So, well, Lynn, I thank you for being our guest today on Since You Put It That Way. I think we put it that way in a few different topics today and really had fun doing it too. So I'm going to just put a commercial plug in for your courses, which they can access on our website, drmarylauder.com. And it is a free course. It's a master level course, though. This is something that's well put together with Lynn's, 20 years of experience of teaching and learning these tools. So this is well defined. This is not something that, I hope it works. It does work. So avail yourself to this tool. And if that work really seems to float your boat, Lynn also works individually with folks for developing more tools and more sense of beingness and things like that. And she's doing that from her location there in Boulder. So thank you for joining us here, Boulder to Michigan. I miss being in Colorado, and I miss being able to see you frequently, but I sure enjoy our connection today and our ongoing connection. And
Mary, this has been fun.
Yeah, thank you for being with us today and sharing who you are and what you bring to the world. I really appreciate it greatly.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day. Thanks for joining us on Since You Put It That Way. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Since You Put It That Way podcast. Today's episode was written and produced by Crowded Table Productions. Technical editing, Malin Long Lopes. Sound editing, Jonathan Fiegel. Music, The River Jordan, written and performed by May Erlewine. Please rate and review our podcast as well. We appreciate your feedback, and hey, be positive, share the love.